Why don't we start with maybe a broad overall statement or something that you would like to sort of situate how we're going to approach all of this and what you would like us to understand by the time it's all done, and then we can start to drill down into some of the specifics, and you can walk us through how we're going to get to this grand conclusion, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I will do my best, because I feel like even after reflecting from our previous conversations, I'm still learning to translate all of this in my mind and articulate it. So um, I hope, like, yeah, I'll do my best to, I think I'm getting better at communicating it. But I think overall, this series, like all of, at least the genre that I work in, all the VFX animation kind of blockbuster kind of genre, it's reinforcing a very like American values, like American hero narrative. Like this is the core of the story. So there is a core that will be the determinant of all the other factors, and then everything else that we add in are things that will ultimately reinforce the core, and they will have entertainment interest, or there will be subplots and other character arcs and things as they navigate with this. But the thing that will drive all of it, that will determine every decision, is small things to reinforce this story core of Andor, and Andor himself being like that Superman figure that will represent American values, American decision making. And I think something to keep in mind, or that I was reflecting on too, is that, and looking at, I reference that story Bible that we all use, and maybe later I'll even read some quotes from it, because I highlighted some things to really drive this home. But the way that we work is that we the way that the propaganda works, that again, like, we're also propagandized to think that we're inspiring people and touching upon people's emotions and universal human truths, or what we call it. But it really is like, how are we propagandizing the audience? But the way that we do it, like in film, and I think these longer series, these Andor streaming series, sort of like operate with a similar thing. We know that we have time, so we're never going to do something that's overtly obvious, like what you might pick up on in advertising, because we know that if we shove it all down your throat, you'll vomit it back up, like it's too much. So the way that we work, and the way that we're trained to work, is by reinforcing this core idea that we want audiences to take away, but we come at you very sideways, and we come at you by, it'll be maybe certain lines of dialogue that will repeat here and there. It's certain reinforcements of how characters respond to the central character that will represent the value system that we're trying to put forward. It will be through colors. Colors are very emotionally impactful, and how we design them, saturation levels, value levels, how we frame shots, how we music obviously is a huge thing. I mean, if you talk to any DJ or musician, they can, control a crowd's like energy levels or emotions through music. We're doing the same thing, and we have time to do it. So there's never going to be, and that was why when I referenced the prison sequence, that was a moment that could reveal what we've been doing to you. But it's very hard to find specific moments, because we're doing it in such small, we're just constantly dripping it into you so that you don't notice, and then you're filled with it by the end. And by the time it comes to the climax of the story, this moment is going to be where you're so on board with the character, and they're going to follow through with the value system that you believe in, and everything in the film or story will work out that this was the right path to go on. So
Can I
mhm.
so if you don't mind, there's
Yeah.
two things I wanted to set up from the beginning. One, a point of clarification that kept coming up. I was just reminded of as you started here from the comment section of our previous discussions.
Mm-hmm.
You've already referred to the protagonist as Andor.
Yes.
can we clarify the nomenclature here? Because he's known as Cassian.
Oh, yes, Cassian. Yeah, sorry, I keep call like we can call him Cassian or we can call
No,
him
no,
like.
no.
Is
I
it
just want to be
easier?
clear that when, because I do the same thing. So just in
Oh,
case,
so
if
that it's
and
not.
when we're talking, because he's Cassian of Andor or something like that, or I don't know what the full,
I
but
I think his last name is
is
Andor.
Andor, right,
I
right.
think so. So we could, yeah. But
But
I'll
we just
try
want
to
to be clear that that's who we're talking about. Just
yes,
so
not like
whether
the
we call him
series as
Cassian
a
or we say
title.
Andor, that's who we're talking about, and we
Yes.
understand. So I just wanted to. The other thing is,
Yes.
and I know you have a lot to share with us, but there's one thing that I clipped
Mhm.
that I wanted to share from the beginning.
Oh, I would love that actually. Like, because then I that would help me if you present to me the things that get you, and then I can deconstruct
Well,
them
I only have
too.
one, and this is, but
Okay.
again, it's also in some ways it's also about a point of clarification, because when you're talking about the mechanisms or the ways that the industry will uh, get us to do something or to feel
Mhm.
something, to get us to, the something is what some of us have been caught up in. In other words, when you're talking about the way the Western hero or protagonist is set up, I get all of those as being tropes of the industry. But
Right.
from I'll speak for myself.
Hmm.
What keeps getting me, even on the rewatches, is that the something I feel like there is an attempt to get us to is some sort of radical, critical challenge to us to rebel and to resist for something greater than the standard liberal or neoliberal Hollywood standard or goal. That there are so many references and allusions in what feel like different ways in this series to real actual radical thought.
Hmm.
It's so clear that I thought it was clear that
Yeah.
somewhere in the writing team there were people who were reading Fanon and Marx and Cabral even and
Hmm.
Gramsci for sure.
Hmm.
There was some attempt to some actual left politics in this film. So the
Hmm.
one example that I'm going to share uh to that I collected to sort of make my point is, and I will, oh, wait a second. So good. All right. I'm glad I have a moment here. Because let's see, this to get, nope, I need local video. That's what I need. And then, okay. Now, oh, please don't tell me it's not letting me show it.
With
Sometimes I have some issues with
oh,
local
show me.
video, with pulling something up.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
Mhm.
So from and I'll put the link in the show description, from that video that we got from our dear friend Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows,
Mhm.
that 6 hour screen,
Right.
I can't remember but I'll put the link in the show, but it's a
Mhm.
6 hour compilation of
Yeah.
all of their reviews of Andor, of the series.
Hmm.
They do something here to make a point that I'm trying to make here, that
Hmm.
I feel like there are attempts to get us to some sort of elevated radical thinking beyond the standard, again, liberal norm. And
Hmm.
so in this video, they make reference in a comparison to what the way Andor is shot, to compare to the classic Battle of Algiers, which for many of us is a sort of a canonical revolutionary film.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, and that is in it that is often at least understood to be advocating or defending the armed struggle of the Algerians against French colonization and
Right.
all armed struggles against all forms of colonization. So when they show in this clip sort of side by side views and top bottom views of how the shots are done here, the wide shots for the crowd scenes, the bringing in of a new leader to suppress the rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
um so they're comparing the way it's shot to you see here the comparisons in the top to bottom,
Mm-hmm.
the support and the storytelling from the perspective of guerrillas and armed rebellions, the bringing in of a new leader here
Mm-hmm.
to suppress the rebellion, the way they're shot, the way they're framed in the shot, which I thought was also interesting from a novice point of view. And this is sort of what I'm getting to. So when you're talking about, so as I was interpreting what you were saying from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
that when the standard uh mechanisms of storytelling in Hollywood are applied, that yes, they're being applied, but to a different set of politics, so that the end result is often the same. They get people like me and others to an end political result or conclusion that they'd like us to, using the traditional methods that get us there.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was maybe getting stuck in our previous conversations, and very interested in having these going forward. So does that make sense? Do you
Yeah,
understand? Like,
yes,
okay,
it
all
does.
right,
And that
okay.
was actually where I found this whole thing to be a really interesting, like that whole compilation is like a case study in itself for even how we work. So
Mm-hmm.
um, this person, this reviewer, is one of our target audiences. We if you imagine that we work in layers, and each layer is decide like sort of is there to reinforce or enhance the layer that came before, which thereby reinforces the main story ideas. I'm going somewhere with this too. Sorry. So this is sort of like a top sweep that we do for this kind of demographic, because we're used to these people at Comic-Con and stuff. Like we kind of psychologically profile our audiences. So there is a demographic that is the kind of person that, when we go to Comic-Con and we do these panels, and these people are our biggest purchasers. These are the people that are going to buy all the products and spend the most money and everything. So there's always a final sweep that it might not even be in any part of the deciding factors of like the initial part of the story, but there will be a final sweep done that's like, where can we, like, just as an example with the Easter eggs, where can we just insert some more Easter eggs to tie it to the franchise? Where can we add another little critter or droid that could be another product? Where can we, and these people are like their psychological profile that we're targeting is also this kind of way that they just really want to know everything. So they are the people that when they come to ask us a question at the panel, they'll have like an introduction to their question that's about 10 minutes, that's citing all the things that they know, like, oh, I read that you went on this set and this and did this effect, blah blah blah. So we have like a 10-minute thing that we have to listen to before they get to their question, which usually is something that they think that they saw something that nobody else saw, and so they ask this question about, like, I noticed that you put a little red badge here, and then they really think they had like a gotcha. So this is a commercially targeted demographic, and there's a whole sweep that we would do. The stuff that they got caught up in could actually be any film. Like, you could take I don't know, like Casablanca, and turn it into a star, like have the same story, the same underlying story, but just change the costumes, change the world, change the superficials, and link it to the franchise, because this franchise is such a big money maker that, this is where they love, like, even Andor. I mean, I don't think when I mean, it could have been an intention, but personally, like having, worked on Rogue One, um, Andor only became interesting because of the result. Sorry, the character of Cassian Andor only became interesting because of the role he served in Rogue One, and it was an opportunity to expand. Just like how, now that the franchise has been acquired by Disney, the universe is just maybe, it's like his sister serves as a plot device in this story, and then we don't hear about her, and she's not really significant because she's purposeful in her plot device, but maybe one day there'll be a franchise with this person, but it's not significant to what we are manipulating, like what the underlying thing of the story was. So that 6-hour video, I'm like, we see these people all the time, and they make connections based on the superficial details. These are things like, if you're wondering, like, I don't know, like when Biden was eating ice cream and saying there's going to be a ceasefire next week, and they're like, he was eating vanilla ice cream. Maybe that means white supremacy. And maybe this president also liked vanilla ice cream, and they're linking it to him. And maybe it does mean white supremacy, like maybe there's some symbolism there, but maybe he just likes vanilla ice cream. And so there's that's sort of like a final level of details that's all the way up here. Where we're manipulating you is here. So these are distractions. These are things like when you see politicians also just rambling on the news, distracting you while they're doing something. There's some other thing going on, but they're trying to distract you with, this happened today, this happened today, this happened today, this is linked to this. So this demographic gets caught up into it and reads into things that are there mostly to engage them. And because there's like whole Wikipedias about Star Wars and what's canon, what's not canon, and like all of that kind of stuff. I will say that, like, having skipped through the video, he landed on two things that I would agree with in terms of being relevant. One thing that he commented on at one point, and I forget when it was he mentioned, he went into a thing about how the directors don't know anything about Star Wars and that's not significant. And then he's adding his insight about how he probably agrees with that, because you want someone that's artistic to be making these decisions and blah, blah, blah. And that's the case of it. Most of these actors are not Star Wars fans. Most of the like, people don't, when we're crafting this story or how these stories are made, you don't have to be a Star Wars fan. We will get those people to fill in those gaps, or to do certain things. And in the way that we work, like, research is always a big part of what we do. It's not, but I wouldn't say it's depth of understanding. So a lot of, and I think that this is very important, that a lot of the people that are in these rooms, they're not people like myself or like yourself. They are mostly, it is a frat culture, and they are mostly white men that came from upper middle class families, or even wealthier, like, I don't know, whatever. They're coming from very financially secured families. They're coming from spaces where they've never, like, experienced any of this, and they study it as research. Like, the Battle of Algiers is very famous. So it's these kind, I didn't work on the cinematography of the Andor series, but they would be like, what's a revolutionary film, what's a famous revolutionary film, and they'd go and look at it, and they'd mimic the cinematography, and they don't
So,
need
but
to.
that would be so. I'm sorry to jump in again, but
Yeah,
that would be my point, or
yeah.
where my question is still stuck. If Gilroy himself or others in the writers in who craft the screenplay, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
final script is
Mm-hmm.
going to be, if they have, so I'm not saying if they have a certain political interest that
Yeah,
is to drive an audience beyond the standard liberal norm, wouldn't they be able to then still be able to have used just what you're saying as a mechanism to get that done? So in other
yeah.
words, the people
No.
who are
Yeah.
crafting the shots and the edits and doing the coloring and all that other, they don't have to know. In fact, this would be better from the perspective of an insurgent radical, that they wouldn't know, because you're just there to create part of the story. But if I know that the end goal of the narrative is to get people to move beyond the liberal norm, then that process still would work. That's in terms of getting the audience there.
Yeah, but
So
that's
so
yeah.
are you saying then that you're that so are you going to help me, I won't speak for
Yeah,
anyone
that's what
else,
I want to do. That's what
understand
I
how my radical narrative gets subverted
yes.
by the end?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. So what this is doing is like using black faces in high places. They're using radical narratives in high places, or like in as it's a diversity initiative. I think that's the best way to think of it. They know enough. Like, I mean, it's like I guess like the question that I would pose is like it's like with Black Panther, using Oakland, but why didn't they go to Flint? Why didn't they go to Michigan? Why didn't they go to places that they wanted to spotlight? They used something because these white guys Googling Black Panther, the Black Panther Party, will know that they will look, and that's as deep as they go. They look for these things on that, like they're doing it as research. They're observing it as a lens, and we're very good at implementing these things. So the question really is to ask, like, why are they using these ones? Because these are the more accessible ones. They're not actually and they're not like, again, like they open up a community center in Oakland, but they're not cleaning up water. Like Wakanda's not going and addressing the fact that Obama drank a glass of fake water, or dealing with or going to
And
Ferguson,
then
or
and,
like
and
why are
one
they
thing I did think of is that Andor, like we're allowed to see even this radical narrative, because in the end we know that all of these people get blown up by the Death Star and the Empire goes on.
yes, and also that it positions Andor to be like that these things happen
And by
not
Andor, I mean the entire
see,
planet,
oh,
right? Because
wait,
this
is
is the
Andor?
prelude to Rogue One, where
Oh
they're
yeah,
all destroyed. They all
yes,
die
yeah, that was the which was
in
the
the
planet?
film.
Scarus, wasn't it? Scarus was the planet they were destroyed on, or something? Yes, in the film, yeah, that they are all.
No, I thought Rogue One is the death of the planet Andor.
I think Andor's is Andor a planet's name? I thought it was just his name.
Now I'm
Now
confused.
I'm confused too. But
Anyway, but the
what I
point is, all
the
of the people in this series, they die. This is a
yes,
prelude. We all know that they all
yes,
get blown. The planet, that whatever the name is, the planet
yes.
they're on is blown up.
So
So that's why I was thinking. That's why we're allowed. Like they'll give us the sort of like, you can have your little rebellion, but it's going to fail, and we win anyway. That
yeah.
that was my one. But anyway, okay. I'm sorry. Go
Yes.
ahead. Yeah.
So no. But this is what. So I'll just read a little quote to start this from that storybook that I copy pasted it. But the author Robert McKee, like in part of the way of educating us to be good propagandists, the quote is: over the last 25 years, however, the method of teaching creative writing in American universities has shifted from the intrinsic to the extrinsic. Trends on literary theory have drawn professors away from the deep sources of story towards language, codes, text, story seen from the outside. And I think that is really important to understand, because these things are the details. They're not like what they're building. So ways that we work, like for like I'm gonna do this is where I'm trying to like, I think that if you understand how we work, that's why I was putting in like the color things, it can help understand why I'm not putting value on those things. So for example, like impressionist art, right? Like when you look at impressionist art, effective there needs impressionist art sort of does not overly detail and define things. And when we're making a film, if we really want to co-opt you in the way that we say that we want to, like we want to engage hearts and minds is what we use, right, in the industry. We want to get them on board with our story, and we're very conscious of the fact that it needs to be an engagement. This is what is required to get the audience to really believe in your story. It needs to be an engagement. It cannot just be one-sided. The reason that I bring up impressionist art is that when art is really like, we know this as like painters or artists, when art is super super realistically detailed versus something that's really graphic, like even let's go beyond impressionist art, but like let's just look at like the wayfinding symbols that Raji Cook created initially, you know, like man and woman for the bathroom or all these things. The more abstract the symbol, the more that you can relate to it. If I show you a photorealistic painting of a person and then I show you this little icon of a man, you can see yourself being represented by this graphic icon that doesn't have as much information. You can imagine that that can represent you. Whereas if I showed you a realistic painting of Andor, you're not going to necessarily assume that that's, or see yourself necessarily in a person that doesn't look like you or something. So that use of this is what we navigate to make sure that you also have an engagement. We rely on your imagination. That's crucial. That's crucial to propagandizing you, that like your imagination will fill in the gaps for us, and that will allow you to relate. And this is very much in all of our teaching, like using how to use the audience's imagination in the way that, like, you know, when you have a map and it's got the dotted line, the brain doesn't need a straight line. It will jump to the next dotted line if we point you in that right direction, and you will make the jump. That's literally how the brain works. And this is why we do things, and this goes all the way through the film. Like if I'm animating a character, emotion, like, and we do this in ballet, if I need to bring my arm down, I'm going to lift the arm up a little bit and then go down. It preps the brain to understand that motion. We do the same thing with animation. We do the same thing with story. We do the same thing with camera. There's a clip, the beginning intro sequence, I put a clip in so that I could illustrate this, so we could look at that like after, because I want to finish this point. But there's the intro sequence. It's called leading the eye. There will be hot spots on the screen, and then the next shot, the thing you want the audience to look at has to be in the place of where the hot shot was in the previous scene. And then you can move the character this way, and then the audience is looking here when it cuts to the next shot. So we have ways to set you up. That's significant also because time is crucial in this. I was reflecting on this when I was talking with a friend the other day, because they were saying they miss older movies where it was like, now they would be boring, where you would just sit and like, it's very slow, you know, these old like Italian films or black and white films. But time is crucial because we don't want you to reflect. We need you to be also trying to keep up. It lets us get more information in. It lets us, you know, subconsciously affect you more. So coming back to just even the visuals of it, when you're looking at impressionist paintings, that was something that in that era of art, people, they were more emotional. They engaged things because they had impressions. But what's crucial is that the artist is still controlling what you want to see. So like, and that's another thing that, like, let's say I'll just give a detail. Like I put a little tutorial a long time ago on my Instagram that was like a mermaid. And I was showing how you could put all the scales on the fish part of the mermaid. But if you just put a few, if you just imply them, it feels better. It's a better image. And it's because the audience will feel, you just need to guide them a bit. And we trust in your imagination. And in trusting your imagination, we give you a sense of being in control as well, because you're engaged. There's an interaction now with the screen. There's an interaction with our images. And there's also the reliance on you filling in the gaps on what the story needs to be for you. So this is where, like, I'll throw myself under the bus. When I first saw Andor, like when the first season came out, I think I barely could get through the first episode. It was so tropey to me. And I was just like, oh, I can't, this is just another one of these things. I can't get through it. And then I only watched it again a couple months ago for the reasons I had told you before, because all these people were like on it. And then where it got me, because I was seeing through everything else, it got me in season 2 because it started talking about the propaganda models and then how they were genociding the Gormans. and that emotion of living through this genocide, of people not listening to you, of not believing you, of like feeling like we're being, and I'm still feeling that, I'm still feeling like we're being killed, they're eliminating us, and so seeing that, I filled in those gaps of it being Palestine, and it like I like that's what it does. They get you like, but that could have been, that could have been the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. That could have been
I was thinking
the
Soweto.
Congo. That
That
could
was
have been, yeah. It could be because they know that this is the thing. And then people also sometimes bring up the argument because they're like, oh, but the timeline, is about this, or like maybe this is Ukraine, or maybe this is this, because of like, they'll sync it up with real life events. Again, you're putting in your own thing, but it's designed to do that is the impressionism that we want. We're still controlling the story, but we're creating impressionistic elements to engage your imagination, and we are conscious of that. That is what we are taught.
so
Engage the
but that's a perfect example of where I keep getting hung up, and I
yeah.
apologize
No,
again
no,
for
no, no, no. This,
interjecting
this
here.
is
And I do
helpful.
have
I
the
articulate well, so you're helping
no,
me.
no, no, no. It's not that you're not articulating well. It's that I keep getting stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have the Andor intro pulled up whenever you want to
Okay.
show. We can. Um, to your point, and I get this point. Have This is one of the few things I've long understood about this,
Mm-hmm.
that our imagination is what's being played upon and being
Yeah.
expected to fill in certain gaps so that we can attach ourselves to a more vague and amorphous claim,
Yeah.
right? So as you were listing how people might interpret the Gorman uprising or the Gorman massacre or the Gorman genocide rather,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's even interesting what I just did there, sort of to my point that what I kept feeling like was the emphasis of the points of those scenes in that narrative was that if you are too late to uprise, you're in trouble. Like it was an inducement,
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah.
to get busy with the rebellion because this is the plan. And
Yeah.
and as they lay out, it's Gorman today and whoever else next.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I keep getting, so I get that they're using traditional methods to do this to get me and others, but the end result politically is what I keep getting hung up on is the difference that I'm still trying to figure out how are they how are they manipulating or subverting
Mm-hmm.
the radical message and the radical analysis so that we end up having that, as I usually end up arguing, distilling our revolutionary imaginations through
Mm-hmm.
something that is entirely neoliberal or liberal and going to lead
Yeah.
us nowhere.
I
But okay,
totally, I
yeah,
know, I totally see what you're saying. I actually really do see what you're saying, and I'm gonna do like I like just like continue to push back on me because it's gonna help me like try to explain it. Because my brain is going through this translation process kind of thing too.
it's all
Um,
good. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's so
We're all
normalized in our education and in the way that we produce films that I'm not used to having to articulate it, which is also I think part of the problem because we're
and
propaganda.
I'm not used to having to getting caught up like this. I'm usually
Yeah.
the one of the
Yeah.
among the
Yeah.
first to be like, that's some nonsense, and they're playing on
Yeah.
our radical emotions. But Andor keeps
I think, and Andor says this visually. Like Andor says this in the literal narrative. Like maybe that's the word that I should use, but these kind of surface like everyone is looking. I picked that from the storybook because it's kind of like what I was talking about, how people are analyzing films the way that we did kind of make them a long time ago. People are getting caught up here. They're getting caught up in this narrative. This narrative is much more direct and visceral and tangible. And I'll use another analogy from my own experience because I teach, or I used to teach drawing a lot, and when people have to draw, say, like especially complicated things like the human form, like something anatomical, but in foreshortening, like this, like see how my arm is like this. A lot of people struggle with that, and they draw the arm like this, like they can't get, like they really struggle getting this kind of, how do I create foreshortening? And what I realized in teaching people is that, like, because we're using our mind. Our mind has a lot of preconditioned notions and a lot of knowledge, that it's imposing on how we interpret something. And that knowledge comes from like all of, and that's where it gets problematic in film, because we're relying on understanding our audience to know what your knowledge is and your previous associations, so that this is what we know you're going to put forward. So when I say that with drawing, it's like I have to teach people to stop thinking that they know that the arm is long and skinny, and you have to look at this and see that this is just a little crescent moon shape over here when you look at it visually. And you have to like just take away what you know. And then when you've established that foundation of the drawing, then you put what you know. Then you put that that this actually has a top plane and a side plane to catch the light, and that there's anatomy in it. And then we're going to construct on top of that. But the associations that you have, the understanding that you have, impedes your ability to do these kind of drawings, because you're constantly putting in because you touch it and you're like, this is a long thing. It's very visceral. And this top layer of the film is what is visceral. And so that's what I noticed when I was teaching drawing. And that's why I told that story now, is that this is my suspicion, is that I think that this is what audiences get caught up in, is like they touch it and they're like, if the arm is not a crescent moon shape, the arm is like a long cylinder, a long thing. So we, and like I was saying, we know our audiences. So every layer of the film is going to be addressing how we know how you're going to fill in the gaps. And that's why I was saying these films coming out right now are for audiences like you, that we know that. So these directors don't necessarily know enough, but they might have a consultant that just says, you know what, this film is really popular. This is like radical people love this film. Like literally, like they and I don't even know if they know. I don't think they've read the literature. They'd probably quit their job if they did. If they
Well, I also thought of it that maybe they do it to if I'm going to give some room for what for
Mhm.
that maybe they do it in the way that I know a lot of film studies, quote unquote purists, will study Birth of a Nation because of the cinematography and the way it sets up a shot, and ignore the white supremacist pro slavery arguments. And then they might look at a radical film in the same way and say, we're not doing this for the political content per se, but we're doing it for the way the film was shot. We appreciate the way it was shot. And then to your point,
Yeah.
we know that it has some popularity in the way that white
Mhm.
supremacists and white supremacist adjacent or suppressed white supremacists like Birth of a Nation as a film.
I
But
would
yeah,
argue that most of the people in my industry have not even heard of Birth of the Nation or seen it. I think it's
really,
beyond their scope, beyond their like. That's why I'm saying I'm trying to that's what
wow.
I'm trying to explain, is that imagine, like, when you watch them on their interviews on these late night talk shows. And I just want to add that it's kind of interesting. While I was looking at that, like that video, the guy that gets obsessed with all the little detail things, um on the side, like on your YouTube, it's showing you things on the side. And I saw that there was like I think it's one of your Jimmy someone talk show guys, Kimmel, I think. And there was a talk show where they got the actor that plays Cassian Andor to interview the two of the actors from the Superman film. And again, because we know the audience, so I felt, for me, it felt a little validating to see that, because I'm like, they know the audience that they're targeting. They know, like, yes, it's in a sci-fi like realm, but there have been lots of other films that have come out, or even Fantastic Four, different things. Why these two are they putting them on this talk show together? Because they know that there's a specific audience that these films are overlapping with, right? So, like, even though one is DC Studios and one is Lucasfilm, like Disney kind of thing, or whatever. Like you think they're separate studios, but they've got all these people like kind of, you know, engaging a specific. This is all again because we know the target audience. So, like I said, like that's why I use Black Panther as an example. They don't need to know more. They don't even need to know what Oakland means, and that's why they'll hire directors like Ryan Coogler will know a little bit more about what Oakland means, so that like don't worry, he'll take care of those details, right? But he's not really the one that's building the story. And so hopefully like what I hope that, you know, by the end of this that I'll get to is that if you understand how we are building the story, you can understand that this is so insignificant. And yes, I like, you know, like I listen to those speeches and I'm like, you know, my resistance side, like from, you know, some of the manifestos or the speeches in the film, they have good writers, like,
I
but
made it my outro. I
yeah,
put a boom bap beep under it and made it my outro. And I'm
they have
and
excellent
I'm not
writers.
giving that up.
You know what? I think. Look, I still have. I've always been a Star Wars fan because of the Resistance thing. Like when I was a little girl, like Leia was my princess. You know, like I was like,
Well, then
I was,
George Lucas, like I wasn't a Star Wars fan, but George Lucas says the resistance were the Viet Cong.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing. They will observe it, but I think the difficulty too is that they are also targeting a very American audience, and like I just want to add the indigenous side to it, because there's a lot of things in there, and that's what I think Andor specifically also is targeting in the way that Superman did, because these are about foreign policy events. These are about getting people co-opted and on board with American exceptionalism. And my supervisor had said, my former supervisor, because she specializes in racial. She's from Angola, and she specializes in racial capitalism. And she said, like having lived in Europe, and she also grew up a lot in the States as well, or because of the work that her parents did. Um, and she was saying that, you know, it's her observation is really interesting, because in America there's almost like this um there's so much self-righteousness and even like denialism, like just feeling like you know best, you're right, and if America did the wrong thing, it's because you didn't understand. Like the intentions are always like the most noble, like you are noble even if you make mistakes or whatever. And in Europe, the way that people get co-opted into all of these narratives is more through some kind of guilt, like a guilt obligation to the monarchy, or a guilt obligation to the crown, like they're carrying Holocaust guilt, or they're like, you know, or colonial guilt. But then that is used as in like a lot more of their storytelling in their media. So this underlying theme, like these, like, so I think maybe that's also why, you know, for myself, watching these films, not being an American, it feels a bit more real to me, and that's why I want to, you know, kind of explain. But I think that's important to note, is that these films specifically are targeting an American audience and a sort of a foreign policy idea. So they put things in like these, like, you know, so they've researched things like revolutions to colonialism, or uh, just different like, you know, because Battle of Algiers is a very famous film. Like and I think that's why I was using the Oakland thing. It's like, just remember that they are doing like the first access references. They will research it. Like that's something that we enjoy doing. We love, like, we're very much like, I don't know what did they call themselves, like the Egyptologists or something. It's very much in that mindset of, this is how we approach like all of these kind of story, like these ways of researching things, and you know, like, and the Indiana Joneses, or all these things. Like we love like telling foreign stories and like different things like this, like that. And that's why I'm saying, like, imagine that mindset of these kind of people that are sitting at the talk shows, what their lifestyle is, what their life is, what they've been challenged with in life. These are not working class people. These are not um, people that have experienced any racism. Like, you know, you go and, like, I mean, even all of Andor is basically like a nepotism thing, where Gilroy had his two brothers come on board after he was working on Rogue One, you know. So, and they're all good. We're all good at our job. We're all good at this. And the underlying thing is, what we're trained in is how to win your hearts and minds, and how to, but we know that a story core is very essential. And so in Andor, the core really is, again, he's like the Superman thing, but you know what we learned from audiences, especially after Rogue One, was that and you see the franchise veering this way. Audiences didn't want to see the monarchy anymore. They didn't want to see the Skywalker monarchy. They wanted to see the people on the ground, you know? So we just make the people on the ground the new monarchy. We just make Andor. So this like and that's why when we look at the intro, like I'll finish this whole point that I'm trying to make, but then when we look at it, I'll point out how we're doing these things. But Andor is like everything in this film. Like Andor's pretty milk and toast. You know, like I also found it very hard personally to find this character very interesting. Like even in Rogue One, I was like, his acting's kind of flat. He's kind of there's nothing like really deep about him. It's more just like he'll do these dramatic actions, like he'll kill people immediately or he'll do something, and that signals to us that he's, you know, a like I don't know, has a heartlessness about him. But there's nothing in like in his like performance or nuance in the way that you see the characters framing him, right? So he is very kind of milk toast in that way, which again allows him to be the conduit, allows him to be the vessel of the idea that we're trying to get everybody to relate to. If he's too specific and too nuanced, you're going to lose some of the audience. You need him to be impressionistic enough. So the like he is positioned and everything, and that those are the signals that you can look for. Is like it's how the characters respond to him, how the characters create who Andor is without him telling us who he is. He never actually tells us who he is. It's the other characters. It's the other characters that rely on him, that say Andor is going to save us, Andor is going to do this, Andor is going to do that. It sets up the whole world that he's going to do that. And then when he starts, as the story progresses, he starts making decisions. Eventually he starts making some of his own decisions that are thought out, that are genuinely thought out, and you see the gears turning, like when he kills the guy after the heist, you know, or things like that, and so they're building us to get on board with him, and they're easing us into what his decisions are. So by the end of the series, we feel that this is what's important. So so when we get to these surface level things, like referencing the Battle of Algiers, and maybe that does, you know, signal the audience that they're targeting, right? But what they're still doing, and like what I said before, is that it failed because Andor wasn't part of it. Like, so if US intervention had been involved, that makes the world better. Everything would have been okay. But the US didn't really get involved with them. And then there was nothing the US could do. So they just got genocided. Like, these are the kind of like messaging things. Yeah,
Is
go
that
ahead.
what you're saying is meant to be understood by the end of the film Rogue One?
No, at the end of the series, Andor. The end of the film, I think the end.
Because at the end of the series, I thought the end of the series is supposed to be setting us up for the fight that then takes place. Because just
It is
quickly, Rogue One is I think
where they get the plans for the Death Star that they
no,
then
but I'm saying it's the only film. I think it's the only film when they did the first reboot way back in the late '90s.
Mhm.
I saw the first one, and other than the
The
initial
episodes 1, 2,
trilogy,
and
I've
3.
not. Yeah, I'm just trying to say that I haven't seen most of these films. I'm not a particular Star Wars fan. I don't.
Yeah.
So, but I did go and watch Rogue One because Dr. Burrows told me to.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Before I watched this series, so I would
Mhm.
have the context. And then
Yeah.
so I thought the series is supposed to be propelling us to what we see in Rogue One,
Mhm.
where Cassian is very much involved, and
Yeah.
then of course it ends with them failing and them all dying.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, but so that's why I'm a little confused by what you're saying here about it failing because he's not involved. What am I?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes. We're talking on different levels. That's all.
sorry.
But
Okay,
yeah, no, no,
all
no.
right.
And that's can I just turn on my light because it looks like it's going to storm outside, and and
Sure,
it's
sure,
getting
sure.
dark in here, and I didn't have
Yep,
a light on.
no
Just one
problem.
second. Okay, that should be more helpful. Um,
Okay.
so so basically, that's sort of like dealing with the canon and the franchising and everything, and something that is, like there's obviously like the prequel trend, and this all has to do with just sort of like making more products, like more capitalism, more products. And obviously with Star Wars, um, the prequel trend is really big, but we're seeing this in a lot of movies, right, where they want to go back and make the prequels. Rogue One was like, again, there's this whole universe that they just have unlimited options to explore for more film ideas. So uh, Rogue, and just to put a little caveat in, like I am one of those people that like I really loved the Clone Wars animated series, and I'm very adamant about telling people, like, you have to go to the Star Wars website and watch it in the right order, because it was released on Disney Plus in the wrong order and it changes the story. And I'm like, this is very important. And like, even when you said that I was that we couldn't be friends because I didn't like Andor, I've literally used that line in my life, that I'm like, I can't be friends with you if you don't like the Clone Wars. Like, if you like, literally. So this is where I'm coming from. I am one of those people that like really loved this world and this idea of resisting the empire, and like, like, and so I was very excited when, in my naive sense, when I didn't really understand the extent of our industry, I was very excited when Disney acquired the franchise, because I'm like, oh, we're going to get like more, things from this world. So that's kind of like appealing to us, appealing to the sales, appealing to the opportunities, because they have to keep coming up with film ideas, right? And so the Star Wars universe lends itself to all of that. And so I mean, the world and the canons and the literature and the way that this world has expanded, even in like, I've only, like, even though I'm obsessed, like, I kind of have just stuck with sort of canon in the film world. Like, I never read all these books and novels and all this stuff, but like there is like a whole like world and history of this, like, written, and like just, it's just become epic, right? And so this does, like, these stories, they're always trying to tie them into the canon, and that's where, like, Rogue One was an interesting idea, and I think it was responding to audiences as well, because you always watch, like, the Star Wars legacy was always about the Skywalker dynasty, the chosen family, and like all this stuff. And so this is where, the market is shifting, the audiences are shifting, and Rogue One was the story of, like, well, how did they get the plans for the Death Star? Like, and people, when we observe our audiences, like, so many people love the fan culture. Most people love Boba Fett, this bounty hunter that was in the first movies, that just fell into a sandpit. Nobody knows anything about him, but then that became a whole spin-off series, so the universe lends itself to all these opportunities. So Andor, it's tied in, and, like, again, like, that's why I'm saying, like, on the most superficial level tie-ins, it's things like, oh, he's wearing a patch that, like, Luke Skywalker wore in this thing, and we'll add those details in, we'll put that in so it ties it in. But then there's stronger ties that are things where it, like, narratively, like, like, in the superficial, in the narrative of events, I'll call it that, the narrative of events will tie into the world events, like as if we're recreating a real history, right? Like a real, so there are people that keep track of those timelines and all those things. So that's all, like, that's all there. It's I'm not trying to say that it's not there, but it's not the point. It's not and that's where I'm hoping to find better language with you as I try to explain it. But the point in Andor specifically is that when we're trying to look at our markets, or in terms of, like, what imperial agendas are, because I mean, that's also why in the intro I wanted to very specifically put the credits, because I think it's important to remember that this is a Lucasfilm production, and Lucasfilm was created to test and drive 3D software for remote drone warfare. It's very important that they are always coming up with stories. And so this is the foundation, this is the company. just like, so that we're clear, it's not even just about like, I don't know, like white supremacy or racism or these groups. This is literally a military company and addressing remote warfare. Remote drone warfare was the reason that Lucasfilm was founded. So, and Tim Lenoir goes into that like extensively, because that started with the University of Utah and DARPA like funding it. So Lucasfilm was birthed from that, and Pixar was birthed from Lucasfilm, and that's why they're both in San Francisco and not Los Angeles. So that's Lucasfilm, just to start. And so the connection, like the reason that Andor is appealing is that because of Rogue One, this was another character that people got very engaged with. So it's an opportunity that, like, oh, we could make a spin-off series of this character. They did the same thing with Ahsoka. They did the same thing. So it's just that this character appeals to that group that likes the resistance. And then right now, because they need to co-opt people that are more, like I said, they're co-opting movements, not visible diversity groups. So that is the group that would watch Andor. That's not the group that's going to watch, Luke Skywalker's granddaughter's legacy film, or something like this, or watch the Jedis, these elite Jedis fighting with each other. It's the group that is into these kind of resistance ideas. So then what they do is that they tell you that story on the superficial level. They've got events that mirror events that they already know about, because they've been perpetrators of most of them. They know the response, they know what all of that is, and then they're creating a narrative that reinforces like American exceptionalism, that reinforces this idea of like getting Americans to feel like they always know better, that they have the right to, they are the ones that know better, they have the right to intervene. And that's the main message with the CIA. And the article that I cited, and now I'm forgetting their last name, but you brought it up also, that that they wrote about why the CIA is in Hollywood, and these kind of differences between, like, say,
Alfred and Secker.
yes, thank you. Alfred and Secker were writing about how, the Pentagon wants sort of like heroic representation of the military, but the CIA doesn't really care if they reveal secrets, as long as they get core messaging through, that they keep reinforcing this idea. So when you look at, as an artist, when I'm watching these films and I'm like, why did they make that shot decision? And also care, like, again, thinking about the difference of narrative of events, something I reflected on after our other conversation was that I realized people are talking about characters like people, and we see characters as devices. They're devices to reinforce what the protagonist or what the story values are. And then once we've determined how their device serves it, and that they've served that in the blueprint, then we can go in and like work within their role to figure out who this personality is, what audiences are they going to identify with. The actor will come on board and really believe in their character and bring that extra bit to it. But when you look at how we build films, like from the base up, and how we use the techniques, and if you interrogate it that way, you're going to see that the patterns are drawing back to a certain reinforcement. And like I said, it's never going to be visible, or you'll vomit it back. We don't, like, a big no that we, like, another thing that we always say is don't spoon feed your audience, don't spoon feed your audience. So these messages are meant to be that if you walk out not knowing but feeling something, that's how we feel we made it. This is like how at higher levels we feel we made a successful film. And that's where we get very snobby when we see amateur films that were like, they didn't have that subliminal propaganda in them, they just did a literal thing of the film. And student films tend to do that because they're not as experienced in this, so they just do the literal thing, like this event happened, then this event, and the character's feeling a bit challenged, or this happened, but they don't have that thread. And that thread is what holds the whole thing together, whether you're conscious of it or not. Everything in this film, in Andor, reinforces that. And and Andor, like, you have everything reinforcing patriarchal imperialism. And they, like, I'll give another example. because even my friend, like, she was saying, and she's a story artist, and she was even saying, oh, I didn't I thought Bix was kind of cool in season one, but then she got lame in season two. And I was like, no, like, and then like, but Bix Bix had a through line that was very effective. Like, Bix is loyal. Bix is a trad wife. Bix is the sci-fi trad wife. Because in all of these films, when you watch these things, like in this world, there is no like house with baking and suburbs and friends coming over. The home is the ship. It's the adventure. So there's always the hot, sexy mechanic. She was in Transformers, she was in whatever. And in Bix's case, she's like that loyal, devoted wife. She was loyally devoted to Andor. Everything is about him. Everything is about elevating him. She's the mechanic. So like people might look at it and be like, wow, she's such a badass. She's like a mechanic. No, she's a trad wife. She's like taking care of the home. She's the person that can supply all these things. So everything in Andor is reinforcing this very like white patriarchal imperial hegemony. These are the messaging things. So it
And
might
it
look,
ends with her literally holding his child as he goes off to fight,
exactly, it's the
and she's
legacy
looking
lives
into the
on.
sunset. The legacy lives on.
Natalism, natalism. Yeah, exactly. So see what I mean? Like when you start seeing how we build the story and the devices, it doesn't matter that they reference the Battle of Algiers because it actually serves to enhance the device. So
and then
that's
it devalues the revolutionary message of the original by the association. That's the other part that I'm really that's a
exactly.
personal struggle for me.
No,
But
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's exactly, and that's what they, so when you start, like, that's why I was like, if I maybe explain to you how we think, then if you look at the film through that lens, everything suddenly becomes clear. And that's why I thought it was interesting, the video that this 6 hour long thing that I kind of jumped through. But what was interesting was, like just the leaps that he made, the speculation of like, well, this could mean this and this, or he even would say it like, this must mean this, or this means this. But he's dealing with all these little things that I'm like, we're relying on you to do that. You can make whatever leap you want.
Yeah, yeah. There were a few of those. I enjoyed it mostly for the Easter eggs and the references
Yeah.
to stuff that I didn't, but in the background and all that, what did
But
this symbol and this word reference. But you're right. It does. He was saying a lot of this makes me think of, and
yes,
then, but that
yes.
requires you to have a basis of thought from which to draw. But
Yeah.
so yeah, okay.
Even his analysis of like film techniques, like I caught a couple parts where he was saying, oh, when you do this with the camera, it means this. It was very like what maybe someone that's a fan would say, but it's not like somebody that actually went through this kind of training. That's not how we use
Oh,
camera.
it sounded film schooly. I
Yeah.
mean, when he would
I
talk about
could have,
when you put someone in one front and then they have this much space in front of them or behind them, it
it's
means
like the
this.
basics. It's like a 101, maybe like maybe an
Okay.
undergrad 101. But one thing that, like it's kind of like you also, when we're crafting these, I mean, this is why it's not as obvious as a television commercial because we have time. So, for example, another thing that like, and that's why I sent you these color keys. We have something called color keys or color script. And it's basically like you don't even need to know what the story is about. We can look at the color design of the entire film, and that's like how, like, what are the palettes of each shot, and you can see where the emotional highs and lows are, where you're taking the audience, what you're doing. So we look at it even just visually, without sound, without dialogue, without anything. We will look at these painted color keys and we look at them in sequence, and we order them. We know that if we want a slow transition of emotions, we're going to use
So
into these colors.
let me interrupt again
Yeah.
because you mentioned the intro. You wanted us to look at the intro.
Oh, yes.
So can we do that, and then we'll come back to the color palette so that I can bring it up and you
Yeah.
can